My name is Charlotte Rowe. I'm a garden designer and I have designed the ABF The Soldiers Charity Garden this year at Chelsea Flower Show. I had the idea to do this garden when I was in the Imperial War Museum and I saw a painting called Over the Top by John Nash. My first thought was to approach the Soldiers Charity, which is the Army's national charity. We started planning the project together back in October 2012. It's quite a long process getting to a garden at Chelsea. In addition to my relationship directly with the Soldiers Charity, I have other reasons for doing it. My grandfather, who I was very close to, served in the army from 1913 till 1949, including going over the top on the first day of the Battle of the Somme on the 1st of July 1916 and surviving. We're standing near the village of Fricourt in the Somme in northern France, at the spot where my grandfather went over the top. There were a series of battles, but the first day was the biggest day when nearly 20,000 British soldiers were killed. The landscape you see here today is very, very different. 100 years ago, it would have been full of craters and trenches. There would be no trees. There would have been just burnt out stumps. The topsoil was completely stripped off of the land. What we see now is very different from what they'd have seen then. This is the kind of landscape that really represents what we want to show in our garden. It's an astonishing landscape that shows all the signs of past conflict and warfare. The ground is a mass of undulating mounds, which are the remains of old trenches, tunnels and craters. We see this landscape as a metaphor for the human spirit, that the landscape, though scarred and changed forever, has healed and recovered. It was when I saw these landscapes that I really began to shape the design for the No Man's Land garden. This is the Thiepval Memorial to the Missing of the Somme. It's in the middle of the Somme, above all the battlefields over which this war was waged. This is really, really symbolic because it commemorates the deaths of all those whose bodies were never found. We haven't actually included a memorial as such in our garden. I didn't think that was appropriate, but we've actually looked at some of the materials that were used here. We've tried to relate that to our garden. The piece that you find here now is very important and it really symbolises the whole feeling of regeneration and healing, which our garden revolves around. The whole idea of no man's land has been really developed together. This idea that when soldiers come back from conflicts, they need their independence and dignity. They should not be just thrust into today's no man's land. So one of the ways that we've been doing that is have some of the beneficiaries of the Soldiers Charity helping with our garden. And we have Chris Parrott, who has been wounded twice in Afghanistan and has gone through a horticulture course with the help of the Soldiers Charity, and he's going to be helping us build our garden. The design is made up of 3 parts. The left area of the garden is dominated by a large grass mound based on the Butte de Wallencourt, an ancient burial mound on the Somme which became a real landmark to the soldiers fighting there. The land around this shows the scars of battle, trenches and craters with undulating mounds which today are covered with grass and plants. We wanted the planting within this area to be a little bit wild, with wild cherry trees, and we're also using Victor cracker, which is a tufted vetch grass native to Europe, Stellaria gramínea, which can be found on roadsides and in meadows, and a wonderful Silene vulgaris, another European native. We're also using some structure with Taxus baccata globes. The central area of the garden is what we're calling the Lost Garden Zone. It is inspired by the towns and villages which were partially or totally destroyed by the fighting. Limestone sets are interspersed with thyme and chamomile. And here you'll also find some ornamental planting left over from some of the gardens in the square, including Cicerinchium biscatella, which is a tiny, grassy-looking plant with creamy brown flowers. And we've got 2 really lovely, large Acer campestras, field maples, which will be around 7 metres tall and really will dominate the space. Perhaps they'll even provide some shelter if it rains. Across the back of the garden, there's a fairly brutalist-looking concrete wall. The large central feature could denote a bunker or a pillbox, the parapet of a trench, or even a large building left standing on a town square of a village. The inclusion of Portland stone for the stairs, bench and plinth in the garden reflects the headstones and memorials which are now an integral part of the landscape of the Western Front. The area on the right of the garden features a large water basin, which was inspired by the huge mine craters that can be found all over the Western Front, some of which are now full of water and teeming with wildlife. To the rear of this area is a sunken path reflecting the trenches and tunnels of the Western Front. Here we have a lot of waterside and moist-loving planting, such as Cornus canadensis, which features heavily and is found often in boggy, damp woodlands. We have a lovely Geum just popping out, and a Potentilla palustris, a waterside species with red to purple flowers which bloom in the summer. To the rear, near the sunken path, we're going to have a beautiful Trollius alabaster, as well as 3 stunning river birch, which are pioneer trees found in wetland areas. And keep your eye out as well for a few secret plants we're not talking about yet. The next step is we're going to start building the garden on the 30th of April. And we've only got 17 days to build and plant the whole garden, so it's very important that it's ready early enough so the garden has time to relax into its environment. It's been really great working with ABF, the Soldiers' Charity, over the last 18 months. And now that I'm working with Chris on the actual build of the garden, it really does tie things up beautifully. It feels really right.